what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Tuesday, March 13th, 2018, almost halfway through the month here. We have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, keeping us out of trouble and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. So let's get into it right now. A lot of stuff going on today. Very busy news day. Trump is out in California. He's at Miramar checking out the prototypes for the border wall, and apparently they've already narrowed it down to just a few designs, and they'll make a final selection for that. And so that, I imagine Trump is heading back to Washington, D.C. A lot of stuff going on in the White House. Rex Tillerson has been fired as Secretary of State, and current head of the Central Intelligence Agency, Mike Pompeo, is the new Secretary of State. So major shakeup here. Unfortunately, I don't see Mike Pompeo as indicating any reversal of the war policy. Apparently, Trump's personal assistant, John McEntee, has been fired over an unspecified security issue, but don't need to worry about him. He's already joined Trump's 2020 campaign as a senior advisor. Now, back over at the CIA, a little bit of conflicting stories here. There was initially a story that Senator Tom Cotton was going to be given the top job at the Central Intelligence Agency, but apparently that has now gone to the CIA's first female director, Gina Haspel. And Haspel, again, doesn't really signal a return to peaceful times. She's actually wanted by the German government for war crimes. She was apparently involved, one of the architects of the Bush-Cheney kidnapping and torture regime that murdered thousands of innocent terrorist suspects in order to bolster the Bush regime claims of a non-existent nuclear threat against America. So Haspel joined the CIA at a time when the agency was under full White House control. Now all of a sudden we're seeing a reversal. We're seeing what appears to be the beginning of a CIA attempt to basically move in on the U.S. government. More about that a little bit later. Now, as you know, the House Intelligence Committee came on out with a report that said there is no evidence of collusion. They were looking at it for 14 months. Of course, the snowflakes are having to need their Play-Doh and play with a little bubble wrap. The Democrats are screaming, we haven't looked hard enough, we got to keep going. But basically, this whole collusion issue is pretty much over, and the final nail in the coffin goes back to a guy named Felix Sater, who was a Russian-born businessman that was supposed to be the link between Trump and the Russians. And Felix Sater, in a BuzzFeed article, basically came on out and blew his own cover. Said he's been a U.S. spy for the last 20 years working for both the FBI and the CIA. And BuzzFeed basically was able to corroborate it with official government documents. So this was supposed to be the guy that was going to bring down Donald Trump, and he turns out to be a U.S. spook. Now, getting on over to James Clapper, I can imagine that he's rather happy because the 5-year statute of limitations on his perjury has now expired. And it does seem that people in high positions of government, they just sort of wait it out and the problems will all go away. But Clapper appeared before the Senate to discuss surveillance programs in the midst of a controversy over warrantless surveillance of the American public. And he was asked directly, does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans? And Clapper responded, no, sir, not wittingly. And that was a lie, and Clapper knew it when he said it. But he's off the hook for that. Now, Clapper apparently was informing Obama of the Steele dossier's most salacious details, the golden shower allegations. So he was leaking that information as well. And it turns out, according to a story out of the conservative treehouse, Clapper was leaking intelligence reports to CNN during the transition period for Donald Trump. So they were just really after him. Now, Steele himself has gone public saying that he's not sure he really believes the part of the dossier about the Russian prostitutes. Well, if he wasn't sure about it, why did he put it in there? Well, because he was paid to. Now, Trey Gowdy has come on out in an interview on Fox News and basically says that a special counsel is necessary to investigate the misdeeds of at the FBI because of the Department of Justice conflict of interest. First of all, spying on Donald Trump during the 2016 campaign, and then made illegal leaks of classified information once he took office. And Trey Gowdy is saying a special counsel is the only entity that can investigate this effectively. And we're going to hear screaming and crying about that. Another story, this one out of 12160. Apparently, Obama used Fusion GPS to try and dig up dirt on Romney during the 2012 campaign, according to a new book that has just come on out. So a lot of this stuff is really starting to come on out. And we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. There is an interesting series of articles over at WSWS.org, and it's talking about the huge number of intelligence and military operatives from the CIA, Pentagon, National Security Council, who are now running as nominees for Democratic candidates for Congress. Apparently 25% of this November's Democratic candidates are intelligence operatives. So we're seeing the deep state try and take direct control. It's effectively a coup. There are a lot of countries where people who are in the intelligence services are banned from holding public office because of how dangerous they potentially could be. Hillary is on a tour through India and once again took the opportunity to have a speech basically saying that she lost the election because voters don't like black people and white men told their wives not to vote for her and the wives listened. This brings the list of reasons Hillary lost that election to 42. She has just blamed everybody and everything. She cannot accept that we just didn't like her and that we know about the criminal activity of the Clinton clan, as it were. But I got to tell you, I'm very, very concerned about how she's working to stay in the public eye, because to me that signals she's going to try for the White House again in 2020. Although apparently her health is still questionable. When she was in India, she apparently slipped going down a flight of stairs twice, despite being held on both sides by supporters. Now, author Kevin Shipp, former CIA officer and whistleblower, is saying the reason for all the crime and treason at the FBI and Department of Justice can be boiled down to one thing: a global financial crime spree. And he says Hillary Clinton was running and is running a global financial criminal syndicate, and Shipp believes Barack Obama was in on it. And we're going to have Kevin on the show sometime next month. We haven't set a firm date, but we're already in communication about that. Now, one chose Treasury. Now, Julian Assange has come out with the latest tweet saying that CIA spies are just pouring into the corporate media. And we know they've always been there to an extent. It goes all the way back to what was called Operation Mockingbird, which started at the end of World War II when the brand new CIA looked at how Nazi Germany controlled their media and said, we need something like that here. And all they had to do was make sure CIA assets were in the top management positions at all the corporate media. But now they're sort of working their way down the ladder. They're getting into talking head positions. They're getting into the writing room. And Julian Assange is saying, yeah, this is basically corporate media is turning into one giant spook shop. Okay, let's talk about what's going on over in Syria. Yesterday, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, actually threatened that the U.S. will strike Syrian government forces if they don't stop fighting the terrorists in eastern Ghouta. She actually went out and said that. Now, the U.S.-backed terrorists in eastern Ghouta are losing, and they're losing badly. Some of them have already surrendered their weapons under a Russian brokered deal. And Haley is saying, if the UN won't work to stop this, we'll do it unilaterally. So she's actually out there threatening the U.S. is going to attack the Syrian army if they don't stop hunting the terrorists. Now, Russian ambassador to the United Nations, Vasily Nebenzia, reacted by saying that Syria has the legal right to fight terrorism on its soil. Now, Nikki Haley submitted a document to the Security Council to sort of replace the current one, because she said this one has no counterterrorism loopholes for Assad, Iran, and Russians to hide behind. The resolution was not even put to a vote. Now, complicating the situation over there, there is a top Russian general, head of Russia's general staff, Valery Gerasimov, is basically saying Russia's military will respond if the U.S. attacks the Syrian government forces. So we might be looking at the spark that ignites a regional, possibly global war. Meanwhile, Russia has agreed to speed up the delivery of Turkey's new air defense system, the S-400 system. Turkey is saying, we need it now, and Russia says, we understand, we're going to put a rush job on it and get it on down there. Turkey, I think, probably realizes how very close to actual conflict that whole region is. Now, getting back on over to Great Britain, Theresa May has already decided that Russia is behind the attempted poisoning of this Russian double agent. And by the way, there's been another death of an anti-Putin Russian apparently strangled to death. So it looks like somebody's really trying to pit Great Britain and Russia against each other. But Theresa May is saying she's considering a cyber attack against Russia in retaliation for the nerve agent strike. And obviously, Russia is very concerned about that. Russia, of course, officially denies any involvement. And frankly, the manner in which the poisoning was carried out doesn't look Russian to me. It was too sloppy. Now, Russia has rejected British ultimatum, and they want chemical samples. They're saying if the British are not going to bother examining the material that was used to poison this spy, they want a chance to do it themselves. And apparently the Russians have summoned the British ambassador to the Russian Foreign Ministry. So this thing is heating up. Russia is also vowing to retaliate for any further sanctions. So we're being pushed toward a world war. We're being pushed toward a world war. This is as serious as it gets. Now, Trump, on the other hand, is taking a somewhat softer approach. When he's talking about this ex-spy poisoning, he used the phrase Russia or whoever it may be. So Trump apparently isn't caught up in the rush to judgment. Because right now, everybody's blaming Russia for everything. I lost socks in the dryer. Must be Russia. Putin stole my Honda. I mean, it's just gotten completely out of control. You can go do anything right now and just leave the message, Russia did it. And they'll say, oh, yes, it was Russia. Apparently, Russia today could be forced off the airwaves in Great Britain. Apparently, the broadcasting regulator, Ofcom, which has the power to close a TV channel if it decides it's not a fit and proper holder of a license in the UK, said they wrote to Russia today warning that a Russian act against the UK would trigger a fast-tracked investigation to revoke their license. So the wall of censorship is coming down. Truth is always the first casualty of war. Ron Paul is out there saying that the U.S. is probably going to be in Iraq until the U.S. goes bankrupt, which may not be that far off. Meanwhile, down in the Gaza Strip, they're bracing for a new Israeli offensive. And apparently the indications are, I mean, it's regular as clockwork. Every couple of years, Israel has somebody fire a bottle rocket across the fence, and they go in and they pound Gaza. Looks like it's going to happen again. And again, Netanyahu needs blood and violence to distract everybody from his ongoing problems with the corruption charge. But he's got other problems as well. Apparently, because of the arrests for corruption, there's chaos in the Knesset. One party in the ranks has announced their intention to vote against a compromise bill regarding exempting Orthodox Jewish men from military service. This is a big issue over in Israel. There have been riots in the street and violence as Orthodox Jews are saying we would rather die than serve in the IDF. And so they're trying to run this law through the Knesset exempting Orthodox Jewish men from military service, which of course is going to upset all the non-Orthodox Jewish men who are still required to serve. But apparently this is such a contentious issue, it could shatter Netanyahu's coalition government. And that would trigger early elections. Now, over in Korea, a lot of people are viewing the pending discussions between Trump and Kim Jong-un as a positive sign. I assume they're going to be meeting at the Peace House, which is the one place along the DMZ where North and South Korea actually touch without having to walk over a minefield. One of our local politicians is trying to get Trump and Kim Jong-un to meet here in Hawaii. That would be rather interesting and worth getting the camera out of the camera bag to cover. But along the way, people are hoping that maybe North Korea, as a sign of good faith or goodwill, would release 3 Americans who are being detained in North Korea. Now, 2 of them, Tony Kim and Kim Hak-song, were instructors at the Pyongyang University of Science and Technology prior to their arrest and conviction. They're accused of anti-state activities and trying to overthrow the government. They may be spies. We don't really know. Now, the university, which has not been linked to their arrest, is the only privately funded college in the North, founded in 2010 on donations from Christian groups. Now, the third and longest-serving prisoner, Kim Dong-chul, is a former Virginia resident who reportedly claims to have been the president of a trade and hotel services company in Rason, a special economic zone in the North Korean border with Russia. And he was sentenced to 10 years in prison after being convicted of espionage. So we may get them back. We're still concerned, very concerned about heading into war with poor quality weapons. And they've had another U.S. missile interceptor test right here in Hawaii, over on the next island over Kauai for the Pacific Missile Test Range, and it missed. It missed its target. They're not doing very well with that. Now, over at the Department of Defense, Pentagon Undersecretary for Research and Engineering, Michael Griffin, is basically saying that the slow process of U.S. military development and acquisition, which can run 16 years from statement of need to operational capability, which may explain why so many of our weapons are obsolete when they come off the manufacturing line, is basically saying it plays to the advantage of China. China just goes ahead and builds weapons, so does Russia, and this long, complicated, costly process of military acquisition actually impedes our ability to field new weapons. Now, I don't want to see a world war here, but this guy is onto something. He's basically talking along the same lines that Harry Truman did prior to World War II, trying to rein in the process, cut the feather bedding, cut the costs. All wars are ultimately about money, and the first country that runs out of money loses. And the United States does not have much cash. A lot of debt, but not much cash. It's one of the many reasons I think the United States is going to lose this next war. And that's a serious, serious problem. So when we come on back from this next commercial break, we're going to be talking about the latest economic news from around the world. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And once again, I need to basically do a beg here. I'd get down on my knees, but it would take a chain hoist for me to get back up again. Republic Broadcasting is running right on the edge. We are literally at war with the corporate media and the deep state. And they've got all the toys. And we need your help. And if you can help, the address to send a check or money order to is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. If you want to become a recurring subscriber, the phone number is 800-724-2719, extension 03. We really need your help right now, folks. And I thank you, and the network thanks you. Let's go to the phones here now. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Mike? I was watching on YouTube. I guess this was a couple days ago. I watched it today, though. Al Jazeera, which is obviously from Qatar. They're basically the CNN of Qatar. But there was a gentleman named Bill Browder on. They were talking about, like, the poisoning and stuff. And this guy, what a piece of garbage, Mike. He was like the CEO and co-founder of Hermitage Capital Management. He was a former investor in Russia. He actually, remember when Russia was going through their process of, like, collapsing after the Soviet Union, and these vulture capitalists went in there and sucked the wealth. This guy was one of them. He probably got away with $1 billion. And then, he's the enemy of the state. He's who's wanted, But this guy's in the UK, but he's an American. But the lies, Mike, I mean, it's just blame Russia for everything. This guy just hates Russia, but he didn't hate it when he was looting the country. This is the kind of garbage these people are, Mike. I mean, people don't realize these people are just garbage. They're just, I never see anything like it. As a human being, it blows my mind how all these people are capable of lying to your fellow human beings, but this kind of garbagey people, I mean, and it's sad, Mike, there's a lot of them. They
are, and basically it's part of the sociopathy. They don't want to feel that they've harmed anybody that they care about, and so when you have either a financial or a political predator, or even military, you dehumanize your victims, so you don't care about them anymore. That's why there's always a slang term for the enemy, to dehumanize them. During World War II, it was Krauts and slants. During Iraq, it was Hajis.
In Vietnam, remember Gooks?
Yeah, the Gooks, and Charlie. And it was if you're going to prey on somebody, you have to demonize them, dehumanize them, so you don't feel any sympathy or regret over what you're doing. And that's what this guy is doing. And he made a lot of money off the Russians, and, well, I deserve to take it away from them because they're such scumballs. That's the rationale that seems to be going on.
But it's so widespread. Like with Hillary Clinton, we came, he saw, we died, he, and like the reporter laughed. There's a kind of mentality.
Yes.
Like it's amazing. It's like Mike, it's scary. It's really scary that the way these people think.
Yeah, it really, and unfortunately, that's why they get into positions of power. They're utterly ruthless. I mean, look at all the dead bodies behind the Clintons. And now we've got the Clinton Foundation. There are people saying it's just this vast international financial crime syndicate. We have a criminal government. And because it's a criminal government, it doesn't run very well. And they've basically painted themselves into an economic corner. And they're looking at a world war, if not to get out of that economic corner, but at least have somebody to blame for it so the American people don't turn against the government. Not that very many American people are still supporting the U.S. government.
It's just so widespread. It's like in the world, like Britain, France, and Saudi Arabia, Israel. It's amazing how it's widespread oligarchy. They're just insane. And hey, Mike, what do you make of like all these people leaving Trump? Like they're dropping quicker than a baby drops a diaper. I mean, it's amazing. I just never seen so many people leaving. Like so many. Well, like with Tillerson and his aide.
There's a story that just hit What Really Happened by one of the members, where apparently Tillerson was fired over his attempt to save the Iran nuclear deal. And apparently we're seeing a schism open up between the White House and the Department of State. And I don't know that it's going to be any better with Mike Pompeo in there. But all I know is we're seeing all these intelligence agencies, which view themselves as a law unto themselves, moving into all these positions, moving into Congress, moving into corporate media, moving into these top official positions. And I know we've had CIA in high positions before, like President George Herbert Walker Bush had been the former head of the CIA. But I view it as almost like an intelligence coup d'etat against the U.S. government.
Yeah, and then there's a woman he's bringing into the CIA.
Yes.
She's like the torture master. She looks like a wretched person, too. Like, I thought he was supposed to be getting rid of the deep state. He's bringing more in.
Yeah, I know. That's exactly what's going on. Dustin, I got to let you go. We got to take another commercial break, and we'll be back with more news after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And one more military story. This is probably going to make a lot of people very upset. As you know, they just finished this Juniper Cobra exercise in Israel with U.S. forces on the ground in Israel. And apparently the commander of the U.S. 3rd Air Force, Lieutenant General Richard Clark, came on out and basically said that U.S. troops are now ready to die in defense of Israel. Israel, of course, is getting ready to launch a multi-front war against Syria and against Lebanon. Do you remember a while back there was actually a cartoon that came on out that it looked like a quasi-military poster, recruitment poster, and it said, join the U.S. Army, die for Israel. And when it first came on out, of course, Israel supporters were screaming, oh, it's anti-Semitic, it's the Jew haters again. And now here it is, it's real. Now, I got an email from somebody who served in the U.S. military, including the oath that they have to take. Preserve, protect, defend the Constitution, bear true faith and allegiance to it, and obey the lawful orders of my commanders. And there was nothing in there about being sent in to fight a war for Israel. But that's basically what's going to happen. Your children are going to be sent to Israel to aid in Israel's aggressions against other countries. And you should be upset about that. I'm upset about that. But it just feels like the whole world is going crazy right now. It's just insane. We all know what's coming. It's just they're waiting for a starting gun, I guess, literally in this case. All right, getting on to the economic news. Hungary has become the latest nation to talk gold repatriation. Now, they don't really have a lot, but they have some of it in the Bank of England, and they want to bring 100,000 ounces of their gold back home. And that may be a little bit difficult because all of these banks, Bank of England, Bank of France, the Federal Reserve, all these companies operating these gold depositories have been playing games with other people's gold. Remember how hard Germany had to work to get some of their gold back? They didn't get it all. And we covered this in an episode of America's Book of Secrets called The Gold Conspiracy, which I think is still in reruns. I think you can still find it out there, where basically the gold was being used for rehypothecation, and the gold really isn't there. And I remember when the scandal first broke, there was actually an editorial in CNBC saying, it doesn't matter if the gold isn't really there. We've got the paper record. Everything is going to be okay. Well, no, it isn't, because a gold depository isn't like a checking or savings account where they can run it on leverage. A gold depository is like a bank safety deposit box. You go into the bank, you open your box, you put stuff in there. And when you go back in there, the stuff is still there, for which you pay a monthly fee. Now imagine if you go into the bank and you say, I want to get some of the coins and an heirloom necklace out of my safety deposit box, and the bank manager says, well, we can't actually do that. We'll let you peek into it from a distance so that you can see your stuff is still there. But you can't really take it on out. And you look into the box and you realize what's in there isn't what you put in there. It's cheaper stuff. That's what's basically been going on. So Hungary wants 100,000 ounces of their gold back from the Bank of England. The Bank of England probably has about that much, but expect the big stall once again. Now, the other day we were sharing this story about how people just can't afford to live, especially in places like California. They're even starting to have dormitories for middle-class workers, where you get your own bedroom, but the showers and bathrooms are all shared, the kitchen area is shared, there's a common room, and it's insane. There are people who are full-time employees of Google who are still having to live out of their cars. And apparently, over at MBA, their Mike Rivero is saying the problem is home prices are increasing twice as fast as income growth. Now, there's very little income growth, but home prices are definitely rising because we're back to that flipping. We're seeing a lot of flipping back and forth of houses to run up their value, to create instant equity that can be borrowed against. And we know how that ended in 2008 with the meltdown of the mortgage-backed security fraud. We're on that same path again. Wall Street and Washington, D.C. did not learn any lessons from what happened in 2008 because they simply took all the losses and dumped them on the American people with TAR and quantitative easing and all this other nonsense. Now, a lot of the states are in serious economic trouble right now. Hawaii is one of them. And our tourism is down, in part because of TSA and in part because people just can't afford to come here any longer. If you can come here, there's a lot of real bargains to be had, I might add. But apparently, according to this article out of Illinois News, Illinois is the least fiscally stable state this year. And this is according to a study that was done by McKinsey and Company, the global management and consulting firm. And the report considered credit rating, state public pension liability, to rank states on long-term stability. And Illinois was 50th overall. They are in serious, serious trouble up there. But at least in Chicago, the illegal immigrants are getting IDs so that they can vote Democratic in the next election. Now, Chicago is facing a budget cap approaching $260 million. So one alderman came up with an idea. They're going to hire for the police special ticketing squads. In other words, forget about already taxing the people of Chicago. They're going to go on out and have these super ticket writers who are going to go out writing tickets for everything, including quality of life violations. Noise violations, you get a big ticket. Not shoveling the sidewalk right after a snowstorm, you get a ticket. We're living in a nation where the government's solution to their own economic mismanagement is to plunder and pillage the people even more than we already are. Now, Forbes, we have to take them seriously, is saying that your pension is a lie. There's 210 trillion with a T dollars worth of liabilities the government can't cover. They can't even come close to covering it. And we know that Social Security can provide a small pension. It's really not much to live on. And Social Security is going broke because it's been plundered by presidents to try and balance the federal budget, especially Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton basically borrowed, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more, the cash surplus built up for the baby boomers. That's where he got his magic federal budget surplus. He embezzled the money of the American worker, and our government has not been able to pay it back. So every time they talk about the crisis in Social Security, their recommendations are reduce payments, raise the age of retirement. You guys got scammed. You just got plundered. Now, Illinois and California are ignoring their massively underfunded pensions. There's really not much that they can do. Pennsylvania and Michigan are trying to start to close that gap between what pensions are promising to give and what they actually have in the coffers. And unfortunately, that probably means raising taxes or going the punitive ticket route. Here's where it all breaks down. We, the American people, are out of money. We're living on a razor's edge. Almost half of Americans have no savings whatsoever. The majority of Americans are one economic disaster away from being homeless. And if you look at the sheer number of homeless that are out there, we have 8,000 just here on Oahu that we know of. Number could be even worse. 60,000 in Los Angeles. This economy is failing. And maybe we ought to take a lesson from ancient Rome. Because Rome, when it was in its period of wars, had massive homelessness, starvation, hunger, rotting infrastructure. And then after Octavian defeated Mark Antony, there were decades of peace. And Octavian renamed himself Augustus, and they started going back to work to fix Rome. That's the period when the aqueducts were being built, They were expanding the road system. That was where Rome really blossomed, during a time of peace. If you look at all this money that's been poured into the war machine, the trillions that have just gone missing, unaccounted for, from the Pentagon and the government itself, this is not a good government. This is an inept, selfish, sociopathic crime ring. Now, apparently in Providence, Rhode Island, they're going the ticket route. The police are going to be given quotas. They're going to be writing tickets for more made-up crimes, like not shoveling your sidewalk. And they're plundering the people. They're trying to cover the pension shortfall by plundering the people. In other words, they're going to take the money away from you and then give it back to you and expect you to be grateful. Except that you've already paid into your pension plan, if you have one. They're making you pay for it twice. The same thing with Social Security. You put the money in, they took it out, now they're asking you to put more in. Now, Trump is out there saying that the U.S. will win any trade war. I have to disagree for two reasons. One is the debt load, which is extreme, and it's putting downward pressure on the U.S. dollar. The other reason, of course, is that the United States manufacturing has been in a 3-decade-long decline. We don't manufacture the way that we used to. We don't manufacture the quality that we used to. You're supposed to be happy with a warranty that you can bring it back if it breaks in the first 90 days. Other countries don't want to buy our products, not even our military products. Turkey went with Russia in the S-400. No, we will not win a trade war. We're not going to win the real war. This is a nation in decline and about to fizzle out. We just have to hunker down and ride it out. Now, over at the official website for the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they had this chart which confirms there are 90 million legal Americans who want to work but cannot find a job. But they keep telling us the unemployment is only single digits, and they keep pouring the illegal immigrants and refugees into this country, putting a further strain on the job market. This goes beyond mere incompetence to lunacy. It's absolutely lunatic. Now, apparently out in California at the Santa Ana River, they had these homeless encampments, and they cleaned them out, made the homeless go someplace else. You know, go jump in the ocean, swim to Hawaii, they'll take you in. And apparently, in cleaning out the debris, they found literally 404 tons of debris, 13,950 hypodermic needles. Apparently a lot of drug taking going on in those camps. Well, if you're homeless, what else is there to do for fun? And they removed 5,200 pounds of hazardous waste, including human waste, propane, pesticides, and other materials. Now, interestingly enough, in the city of Antioch, somebody got really creative. On the top of the Amtrak station in that city, there's this sort of round little decoration. And somebody just happened to spot there's a homeless person living up there. They pitched a tent, can't be seen from street level, got a great view from where they are, and apparently has been there for a while. And they were only spotted when somebody noticed somebody up there lowering a bicycle to the ground on a rope. So they're getting very creative to find places to live. But the reality is we shouldn't have homeless in this country. In fact, I don't see that our government has any right to send a single penny of our tax money to any other government on earth while there are Americans sleeping in alleys and eating out of trash dumpsters. Now, the media is still out there trying to propagandize about the illegal immigrants and how we should feel sorry for them and welcome them into our homes. And the Los Angeles Slimes did this puff piece on a poor, struggling immigrant Berkeley student, but they failed to leave out that he's previously been arrested for hate crimes. And right now, our universities are telling these kids that your grades are not enough. Your resume has to show that you are a highly competitive social justice warrior. That you have to basically tick off the little boxes of all the things that you've done to support the liberal agenda. And again, the news is presenting a distorted picture of what's going on. Apparently, there are so many illegal immigrants in California. They're still allowed to vote in the Mexican elections. One of the Mexican candidates, Ricardo Aiea, is actually campaigning in California for the presidency of Mexico. That's how insane this has become. That tells us really just how big the problem is. Now, President Trump is accusing California of literally bankrolling human smuggling operations, and basically saying that it's in connection with the sanctuary policies. It's just ripped a hole in our nation's borders. And apparently there has been some financial incentives to organizations that will smuggle or transport the illegal immigrants, even though the transport of an illegal immigrant is a Title VIII violation. It's really, really insane. There's a new lawsuit against Google alleging discrimination against white men and conservatives. Now, discrimination is wrong no matter what direction it's going in, but apparently the liberals are out there saying, well, we believe the white men have been discriminating against us all this time, so it's only fair that we do it back. We weren't discriminating against them. We let them alone. Live and let live. That's my motto. But we're getting into that same kind of social dissonance that led to the disasters in Zimbabwe and now South Africa. It literally could happen here. We'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And boy, another rough day for the stock markets. They're all being driven downward out of fears of what this trade war could potentially do to the economy. We're going to go to the phones now. Andrea in Oklahoma. Aloha, Andrea. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, aloha. I would like to hear your scenario if we did go to war with what we have, since we create ships that can't stay afloat and jets that are fighter jets that suffocate our own pilots, and with that idea in mind, and it's for a country that doesn't. We have laws, the Glenn Act and the Symington Amendment, and they have nuclear bombs, and we're going to go to war and protect that country whenever they have over 200 to 400 nuclear bombs, and that we keep sending them money, and that we have people with dual citizenships with that country that we're going to send our troops to protect in our own Senate, and they do not see America as first, second, and third. They see their own country first, second, and third.
Yes.
How is this going? How do you think this scenario? And who cares about Americans that are starving to death or have lost their jobs or anything like that? Except us. We the people probably care, but our government. I mean, and we're supposed to just sit on our hands and do nothing.
Well, yeah, that's what they're expecting us to do, and I have to be very honest. Like I said, we're going to have to ride this out. I am not in favor of any kind of a violent revolution or civil war in the streets of America. That's just going to make matters worse. But the problem in the long run is the U.S. has been waging war on the rest of the world. It's heading to a world war. Millions are going to die, possibly as much as 1 billion, which I'm sure the depopulation people like Bill Gates are happy about that. But it's going to be an awful mess, and I do not think the United States, if it gets tangled up with both Russia and China, it can't win a conventional war, and at that point it will go nuclear. And we're still going to lose that one, too.
But we have garbage. I mean, and we don't have a whole lot of it, I mean, to go to war with. we're going to run out and nobody's going to supply us. I mean, why would you supply the bully with something that's going to come back and attack them? They're not going to supply us.
Yes.
So we're going to run out. And so this is, I mean, if you were playing chess, this is like a no-brainer not to do it.
Well, you need to understand, Russians play chess, but America's in love with poker or hearts, which is all about the bluffing. And they're trying to bluff their way through. And Putin is not a man you should try and bluff because he is a master chess player.
Okay, now, I just don't understand. I mean,
well, Andrea, we got to take a break for station identification. Do not hang up. I'll come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, hour number 2, and we're talking with Andrea in Oklahoma. And it's an insane situation. Every day that goes by and they're trying to start another war, I think the people in Washington, D.C., right up to Trump himself, they're in denial about just how bad things are. Or maybe they're just believing their own propaganda, which is always a dangerous thing to be doing. Or maybe they're surrounded by staffers who are afraid to tell them bad news or the real news out of fear that they'll lose their jobs. So clearly, our government has lost touch with the American people and their needs and their wants and their concerns. They're just too busy davening to Israel. And Israel is basically sucking this nation dry for money and for military support, and now our young military people. And those military people going into Israel are not there to defend Israel. They're there to help Israel invade these other countries.
So, okay, let's get back to that. What we have in the way of rotten, you said they shot off a missile, and it didn't even hit the target. I guess
Yes.
They did that a bunch of different times, and they are all failures. And then we have Navy ships that cost millions and millions and millions of dollars, and we have these fighter jets, which probably cost, $10 or $11 million.
Are you underbidding it? No, these things are $50-60 million a shot. The F-35, I think, is close to $100 million a unit. The Zumwalt destroyer, the stealth destroyer, with the drivetrain problems, that's $1 billion ship right there.
So let's assume that the rest of the stuff that we're creating is a big failure also, and just, how that is. How is that going to play out? Let's hear, please, look into your crystal ball, and put on your magical hat and just paint a scenario. I mean, I know we're all going to, I guess we should be thankful for the days we have and love our loved ones otherwise we need to do something like, not sit on our hands. And I know you can't endorse that, because if you did, the nation, I guess, the FBI or the CIA would definitely come and shut you down, because then you would be saying something else. But
no, that's not the reason I'm saying that. That's not the reason I'm saying that. If I honestly thought that conditions warranted a revolution or a civil war, I would be making that statement. I genuinely do not think the American people are ready for anything like that. And a lot of people would die to no good purpose. What we're going to have to do is what the Soviet citizens did. We're just going to have to wait out the collapse of the current system and then work really hard to build a new and better country on the far side of the collapse.
If there's anything left.
True. Okay.
At least right now we have things, but going back to what we have a lot of stuff that doesn't work. I guess we would go under as quickly as we start the war.
I don't know that would be the case. I mean, look at how all of these wars that the U.S. Government is already in have lasted far longer than they originally planned. When General Wesley Clark blew the whistle on the U.S. policy toward the Middle East, and he listed these 8 countries, they were all supposed to be taken over and settled down one at a time. And instead, we're still stuck in Afghanistan. We're staying in Iraq, as Ron Paul says, until the U.S. goes bankrupt. We're still stuck in Libya. We're still mired in Yemen. And probably a lot of other places we don't even know about, because apparently AFRICOM is conducting military operations in Africa that we are not even being told about yet.
Well, I think it's really so upsetting. I mean, if I would like to send you to Washington and let you be a lobbyist so you could talk some sense into some of these insane people that are out there.
Well,
I
I'm sure that somebody in Washington is probably listening to this show right now, and they're not really interested in what I have to say. And more importantly, they're trying to take away our ability to say things like that. These are dark times. There's no question about it. These are very, very, very dark times.
But if they're setting off bombs and they can't even hit the target, somebody needs to seriously take a look at what garbage. I mean, a naval ship is being christened and it's a piece of crap.
I remember a few years ago there were two ships, I think they were cargo transport ships, that were built for the U.S. Navy, and as soon as they were completed, they were literally taken to the scrapyard. It's just churning the machinery for the money. And now they're talking about scrapping both the Freedom and Independence class littoral combat ships because they can't get them to work. There's too much whiz-bang and high-tech, and they're having too much problem with it. They want to go back to the drawing board and do another one. I know the Gerald R. Ford is out there. I think it's still in sea trials, or it might be in active service, but it's got lots of problems as well. This is no way to think about fighting a war. We're going to lose this one. I'm absolutely convinced about it. Anyway, Andrea, we're going to let you go. And I'm going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates rejoining the network. Now then, I have just been informed of a new fundraising for RBN. And for you shooting enthusiasts, especially out in the American West, this is a deal you're probably going to want to look at. Basically, RBN has come to an agreement with Front Sight Firearms, which is a training institute near Pahrump, Nevada, not far from Las Vegas. And for a one-time donation of just $500, you will get a Commander Lifetime membership with this Front Sight Firearms Training Institute. Now, the Commander membership sells for $25,000. It's a lifetime membership, and you have all kinds of benefits. Along with the training itself, you get guns at $50 over dealer cost, any class guaranteed with 2 weeks' notice, ammo at 20% over manufacturing cost, free overnight accommodations. Apparently, they're building a new dormitory where you can just stay there, and they've been in business for 19 years, and they have trained nearly 1 million students. And Front Sight trains more people in 1 year than all the other shooting facilities in the U.S. combined. So Front Sight has apparently come on board. I mean, they're practically giving away these memberships. It's $25,000 unless you donate $500 to RBN. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for people who are shooting enthusiasts and want to go through this Front Sight school. And let's see. I just put up this announcement at What Really Happened, and I'm going to do a link to the Front Sight Training Academy so you can see what it is. And just looking at their webpage, boy, a lot of cars there. Looks like a very, very nice facility. So think about it. If you're a defender of your Second Amendment rights, this is a real time to show it. Okay, let's take some more phone calls. Jim in Chicago, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. A couple of things. The things you mentioned about Chicago is 100% correct. This city is broke. As much as I love Chicago, these politicians, they don't know what the hell they're doing, and they're ticketing you for anything under the sun. So you are correct regarding that article.
Yeah.
And the other thing regarding, go ahead.
I was going to say they're actually doing the same thing out here in Hawaii.
Right. Now, we're getting to the situation with Rex Tillerson. Even though I was not a big fan of his, one thing I did respect about him, he spoke his mind. And plus, he did not try to get us into a war. And I think that's what Donald Trump wants to do. He wants to get his lapdogs to support him when either we decide to go against North Korea or Iran. In fact, Tillerson, he told Trump, I don't agree with you, keep it like it is. And plus, he was very critical of Israel. And the reason he was in Africa over the weekend, because he was down there to try and make some deals, because he feels that the Chinese are taking over Africa, and America needs to get in there and sort of stop that.
Well, that's probably what's going to lead to war with China. But again, it is a major shakeup to have your Secretary of State, get fired. And it basically underscores the fact, ever since Netanyahu met with Trump, it's like Trump said, put North Korea on the back burner, you'll get to them down the road. You got to get things mixed up in the Middle East. I need a war to distract from my corruption charges, and we need to get into Iran. And that certainly looks like what Trump is getting ready to do, is pull out of the P5+1 deal and just say the war is on.
And Tillerson would not have gone along with that. In fact, I was reading in the paper where he wasn't even told about Trump going to North Korea. Trump didn't even consult him. But one thing I respect about Tillerson, when he called Donald Trump a moron a year ago, I said, you are telling the truth, and it shows. Trump, the way he fired him, it was really, really unprofessional.
Yeah, and I don't like the fact that Mike Pompeo is the new Secretary of State. I think it's taking this nation in a dangerous, dangerous direction.
Well, you have to remember about him. This is a guy that was in the service. He's pro-Israel. He's against Iran. So, Trump is getting his boys ready to, get us into a war. He wants yes men around him, not anyone who will speak against him.
That's a bad sign. Yeah. That is a bad, bad sign. Okay.
So, war is coming. There's no question about it. And plus, what you said yesterday regarding the trade wars, they always lead to war. Always. So, well, Michael, you take care. God bless.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And we're going to switch over to Joe in California. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, thank you for taking my call. I wanted to talk about three things that I was trying to talk about yesterday. One is the Flexner report. The second is Prism versus Promise software. And the third one is about Mercedes. The first one, you talked in great detail before about Flexner being hired by the Rockefellers to go across the U.S. and get rid of natural medicine and homeopathic medicine.
I think the amount of money that was given. You heard that on a different program because I don't recall that. And getting on to your second point about Prism versus Promise. First of all, Promise is outdated. Everyone likes to say promises this is promises that, and it's become the stuff of myth and legend. Promise was an acronym for Prosecutors Management Information System. And all it was is a database manager. But what made it very unique and powerful is that it had a module that allowed it to access other remote databases. And it was used by prosecutors to build cases, especially against organized crime. And at the same time, it was realized it would be a powerful tool for espionage. That's all that Promise was. And anybody says it's doing all this other stuff. This stuff was written back in the 80s, I think. And it's probably been replaced by something completely. And as I said, it's become the stuff of myth and legend. Prism was one of the systems that is being used to basically violate Americans' privacy, despite the Fourth Amendment. And it was basically one of many systems. They have a whole bunch of overlapping systems. And duplication of effort. Everything that the NSA is doing, the CIA is also doing. Talk about a waste of time and money. And it basically is a surveillance tool for electronic devices, telephones and so forth. And the two are actually not related to each other at all.
Okay. The Cody Snodgrass guy was a guest on Stat Miller's show, and he talked about after he was approached to blow up the Murrah building, and he tried to not do it. So he was taken into custody, and he mentioned the Promise software. That's why I brought it up. Well, the other thing was the Mercedes-Benz, and I know they claim that it's low quality and the engines just fall out of them, but when Michael Hastings was driving his car and the engine fell out of it, and then the car drove another 200 yards or so, and then it drove up onto a median and ran into a tree and blew up with no heat source or no exhaust system since the engine had fell out a long ways back. It just seemed odd.
You've got it backward. You've got it backward. The engine flung ahead of where he crashed into the tree. And Mercedes have a reputation for quality car. I know that when Claire and I were shopping for cars, consistently the Mercedes were obviously in demand. The prices were much, much higher, which is why we didn't even bother looking at those. But the concern with Michael Hastings is that these high-end cars with the Bluetooth and the Wi-Fi and the telephone connections can be taken over. There's virtually no security. And there have been several university IT departments that have demonstrated just how easy it is to take over a car, and especially if the car has got automatic parking technology, you can literally take over the operation of the car and steer it into a tree at high speed. And a lot of people are thinking that may be what happened to Michael Hastings.
My question regarding the car was what caused him to be the target? What did he do that led up to the being?
He was an investigative reporter, and apparently he had stumbled onto something very damning to the Clintons. And as a matter of fact, before he died, he was telling his friends that he thought his life was in danger.
Okay. And I don't know why I thought that you explained the Flexner report and how they were basically, they weren't even doctors. They were just Wall Street brothers or something, and the Rockefellers had hired them to go out and shut down homeopathic and natural medicine and send large sums of money to Yale and Harvard or anyone who would accept the big pharma and the synthetic pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, well, that's actually been going on for a very, very long time. And again, they're building a monopoly. The medical industrial complex does not want you able to take care of your own health. They want you dependent on them. They want you chronically ill so they can continue to make money off of you.
Well, if the Flexners were quacks, why is the Flexner report still touted today as some sort of authority to justify big pharma?
Well, for the same reason that all that junk science about human-caused global warming is still being shown on TV. They're pushing a political agenda. It's not science. It's not fact-based. It's just propaganda to get Americans to stop thinking about taking care of their own health and bring their money to the medical industrial complex.
Okay. Well, thank you for taking my call. Have a great day.
All right, you've got it. We're going to switch over to Francis in North Carolina. Aloha, Francis. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha. Hello to you both. I didn't get a chance to really listen to the first part of the show that much because I was dealing with my chiropractor, or my back rocker, I should say. So I'm kind of skinning it at the moment. But the aspect that a child is going to be told that they fell off their bike and end up injuring their head in parts, and they had to remove part of the skull. I'm sorry, that is such a sad joke. Who's going to swallow that?
Well, wait a minute. There's a reason why part of the skull may be removed, because if you have a head injury and your brain starts to swell, it's got no place to go.
Well, according to medicine prior to the 21st century or 20th century, that's true. Surely they've made advances in medicine that they don't have to remove part of the skull.
Not that I'm aware of. Now, again, I'm not a doctor. I played one once in a movie, and I have a superficial knowledge of some of these matters that I've simply picked up during my life. But at this point, my understanding is that any head injury, if the brain starts swelling, they have to relieve the pressure. They have to open an escape hatch.
Yeah. Oh, as far as the scenario with Israel goes and all the politicians doing this shenanigan, that shenanigan, I know I might hear a negative backlash, and quite frankly, I really don't care. But if they're so wanting the brown nose, the officials in Israel and the military and so forth ad nauseum, then why don't they go ahead and move over there and let it be done with and leave the people in the U.S. alone?
I absolutely agree, but Israel is a parasitic country, and right now we're their primary host. I really wish that all these people who are out there saying, I love Israel, okay, go there. What are you doing here? If you hate America and you love Israel, why are you still here?
Well, I have to agree about your comment about being a parasitic host, although that's kind of understating it, considering what's been going on. If anything, Israel, or I should say Bibi, whatever his name is nothing more than a classic pimp.
Yes.
And so, in using the politicians and the lobbyists and the military industrial complex, or what do you want to call it, and the pharmaceutical industrial complex as his prostitutes. So if someone were to ask what I think of Israel, they can take it and shove it.
All right. Well, on that thought, Francis, we have to let you go. We got to take a commercial break.
Have a good
We'll
one.
be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And don't forget the new promotion that's going on. That's a sweet deal. And one more time, it's on the page at republicbroadcasting.org. I've got it linked to whatreallyhappened.com. And the deal is this. Out in Pahrump, Nevada, near Las Vegas, there is this world-famous shooting school, front sight training. And they have a membership with all kinds of benefits. It's $25,000 for life, normally. But if you make a $500 donation to RBN, you will get a free lifetime commander membership. And there's all kinds of advantages over and above the training. Get guns at discounted prices, ammunition at discounted prices, all kinds of things. I got to tell you, if I were living anywhere in the American West right now, I would go for this deal myself. So anyway, getting on back to the news, and the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We were talking about the problems with illegal immigration. And apparently it has gotten so bad. 49% of Californians plan to move out of the state, according to a new survey. 49%, that's half the population. They're being displaced by the illegals. So somewhere out there in the darkness, Soros is still pushing his globalist agenda. Now, over in Ireland, there's a small town, Lisdoonvarna. They have a population of just 300. And the Irish government has signed a deal to ship 115 migrants into this town. That's a 38% increase in its population. Now, they did actually have a referendum, and the majority of the citizens voted against the plan. But the Irish government says, nope, no delays. We're heading right on in there. You're going to get your share of migrants. Now, over in Poland, an ex-Polish minister is saying that Poland could be the next Brexit. And he's saying the anti-EU momentum is going to be hard to stop. It's not sure which side of the argument he's on, but we're seeing anti-EU sentiment just all across the European Union. They're having trouble holding it together. A lot of the member states are talking about exit and leave. I mean, it's been a disaster for the people of Europe. Between the economic predations of the European Central Bank and the open borders migrant problems, it's been a bad deal for the European people. They're losing Europe. They're losing what they made Europe into. When you go to Germany, what you're seeing is the work of generations of German people. When you go to France, you're seeing the work of generations of French people. When you go to Italy, you're seeing the work of the Italians/Romans going back 2,000 years. And all of that is starting to blur with this influx of these migrants from these other countries. Now, I understand that people want to change countries they're in, but there has to be controls. This idea of totally open borders is a brand new idea. Never before in history has there ever been a country that simply said, we're going to open the borders and let everybody in. Even during the heyday of American immigration, Statue of Liberty and all that, people coming to the country still had to go through Ellis Island. They still had to have their paperwork in order. They had to pass a medical check. And known criminals, people with incurable, communicable diseases, were simply sent home. Every nation has a natural sovereign right to control their borders. There is no natural existing right to just go wherever you want. Now, over at True Pundit, they have a story. It was also covered by the Still Report, basically saying that indications are coming on out. There are apparently some whistleblowers in the FBI and basically saying that, yeah, there was a cover-up about the Mandalay Bay shooting. They're not allowed to talk about it. If they're caught talking about it, they get fired and charged criminally. FBI insiders are saying that, yes, Stephen Paddock had other people assisting them that night. There's forensic evidence for it. FBI agents were specifically instructed not to identify or not to interview these additional suspects. And it turns out that Stephen Paddock was affiliated with Antifa, the anti-Trump group, and an ISIS-linked terror faction. Adding to the insanity index, apparently somebody has filed a lawsuit against InfoWars for questioning the PR surrounding Charlottesville. Now, I don't know what grounds they have to sue for simply questioning what's going on. Questioning the official story is being criminalized. This is absolutely insane. This is a First Amendment case. This could go all the way to the Supreme Court. All right, we'll be back after these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I've just been informed, I left something out of the new donations program. This is the one where for a one-time $500 donation to RBN, you get a lifetime commander membership at the Front Sight Training, which is this gun school, shooting safety school, just outside of Las Vegas. And this is a limited time offer. It's only for the next 90 days. So if you wait too long, you're going to lose this opportunity. So act now. You're going to help yourself. If you are a gun enthusiast, you're going to support the Second Amendment and you're going to support RBN. And folks, we really do need it. We're right on the edge. All right, let's take some phone calls here. Kevin in West Virginia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mr. Mike. The First Amendment's on my mind. This whole thing, attack with InfoWars and their lawsuit, you know, it's Georgetown suing him and a couple of his reporters. Just the simple fact that it's the University of Georgetown, you know, the head of the law department's doing it just for mere questioning the official narrative. What type of world do we live in now? I mean, that you can get sued for questioning.
That's exactly the point I'm making. And they really don't stand a chance of winning the lawsuit. This is a tactic called lawfare, where they're going to try and bankrupt InfoWars with legal fees.
Yep, and this is with the American people. You know, I always hear, you know, stand up, fight lawsuits. Well, it takes time and money, and that's things that, you know, we, the American public, do not have. Nor we don't have the time, nor do we have the dollar bills to back us because of the taxes and, you know, bring our money away to Israel and all these other foreign nations and aid. You know, it's a shame that this is where this has come to. I mean, I'm appalled by this. This not only is an attack on our First Amendment, but it's an attack on our entire Bill of Rights. Man,
our entire Bill of Rights has been under attack for some time. The government routinely ignores the 10th Amendment. They're violating, just with this idea of spying on us all, with our computers and iPads, they're violating the 4th and 5th Amendments. And they've made no secret of the fact they want to take away the Second Amendment. They want us totally disarmed so that we will do what we're told to do.
Absolutely. And the sponsor, and I forget, True Sight or First Sight, that is a heck of a deal. And I hope a lot of people jump on that. You know, and I'm going to try to change some ways of mine and start donating to RBN and to other truth radio shows, you know, alternative radio shows. I just need to do a lifestyle change. And I think this is the way that I need to be doing, is reaching out and getting out there and getting active. And, you know, I'm proud of what you do. I'm thankful for what you do. I'm thankful that you stick your neck out there. Mm-hmm. And keep up the good work. And hopefully Miss Claire gets better and better. And that's all I have for you. Mr. Mike, I hope you have a great day.
Well, thank you very much. And as a matter of fact, Claire is doing much better. And we had sort of had this circus of chiropractors. And she had one that she went to here locally because we had an unreliable car. when we first moved here, our neighbor was a chiropractor, and he is very good. And finally, after this circus between this Claire's chiropractor being on vacation and this other guy who tried to exploit her pain to get a year-long contract, we were finally able to drive into Honolulu to this first guy, and he just fixed her up. She's got one more session over the weekend. She's still sore, but she's doing a lot better. I'm still not letting her do the housework until we know she's really, over this and everything. Anyway, let's go back to the phones here. Steve Elkins, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Don Stadmiller and Ron McDonald and I talked about this last night on John's show. This Las Vegas, basically the FBI told not to investigate the possibility of other shooters. And my question was then, and still is today, that the FBI has said there's an association with Stephen Paddock and Antifa. And if that is true, that's what they're telling right now, then why hasn't the federal government actually labeled Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization? That should have been done right after they made that statement.
I agree. They should be declared a domestic terrorist organization, but obviously they're serving some covert purpose, and so it's going to be hands off. I mean, look at what Antifa has been doing, and for some reason the police don't seem to arrest them all that much. They're being allowed to run rampant across the country right now, and it reminds me of back in the 60s during COINTELPRO, how the FBI was creating their own radical groups to garner a lot of press and sell the idea that the nation was in trouble and that we needed more laws limiting our rights and freedoms. It's the same old story, generation after generation. You're in danger, you're in danger. We have to take away some of your rights and civil protections.
Hey, I have one question for you on a visual. Something I saw today down here in Central Florida. There was a van that had a flag flying behind the van. It was a flag I've never seen before in my life, and so I'll send it out to you. Maybe your listeners might know. But it resembled the U.S. American flag, except there was no color. There was no red, white, and blue. It was black and white. The stars were there, and it did have one color, but it had one stripe at the very bottom, and it was completely bright red. It was bright red, and everything else was black and white, and that's it. It was really weird. I've never seen such a flag, and I wondered if anybody else might have an idea what this was all about.
I've never seen one, but yes, it does raise a question. Maybe somebody is basically pointing out that the United States is being bled to death, and there's only a little bit left at the bottom.
Yeah, it's just a very odd flag. If anybody knows, call in and tell Mike, and I'm listening in. So it was just very odd. I have never seen a flag like this before. It was black and white, stars, and one stripe, a red stripe on the bottom. That's it. Very odd.
Well, if anybody knows what this flag is supposed to represent, please do call into the show.
That's it, Mike. Hey, thanks. Appreciate it.
All right. Let's see. Let's go to Don in the Philippines. Aloha, Don. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Yeah, the thing with Charlottesville, I still don't see really how they're going to charge this guy with murder. Supposedly he's charged with murder, second-degree murder, first-degree murder, something. He was driving his car on the street. If he wanted to murder people, he would have just slammed into the people he saw that he went right past. There was a whole bunch of people on the street that he just went past and didn't try to hit them, If that's what he wanted, if murder was his goal, he would have been slamming the people, and he never did slam a person. He slammed an automobile, or a vehicle of some kind, of van, I guess. And the people in front, supposedly one of them got killed. But if you compare this incident anyway with a similar incident that happened about the same time, was this Bernie bro that went to Virginia. And this guy, no doubt about it, he was trying to kill Republicans. I mean, he asked, where's the Republicans? And he went down to that softball field with his gun and shot, and yet the press went completely crazy about the Charlottesville deal, and the other deal they lasted about half a day, and then it was all over, nothing to see here, just move along.
Well, I wonder why they're charging him with murder. Normally, a vehicular accident death is handled as manslaughter. But I'll have to look more into that Charlottesville case, especially now that somebody's actually trying to sue Alex Jones for questioning the official story. And I mean, that is utterly ridiculous. That is such a free speech violation. And again, they probably don't think they can win the case. They just want to bankrupt InfoWars with legal bills.
They can't possibly win a case against Alex Jones for asking a question. Okay, I'll let you go, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Mo in Florida. Aloha, Mo. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, haven't called in a long time. Can you hear me? I got you on my speaker because somehow the without speaker it's not working right. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you just fine.
Yeah, I haven't talked to you in a while. I listen to your show, and I think you're right on. I don't think there's if you coming up on a break real quick here.
No, we got about 7-8 minutes here.
Oh, good, because this we talk about equal rights and Trump and this and that pollution and whatever it is the different things they got us going crazy about segregate or being prejudiced and racist, all this crap. There's nothing more important than a nuclear war. I mean, that is the end of the species, and I'm not totally. Because there'll always, as Edward Teller once said, there will always be survivors, and that's, the father, one of the fathers of the atomic bomb,
yes,
mentioned that, there will be survivors, but I mean, there's nothing more important that we can talk about, and you're right on you're right on this thing all the time, is nuclear war. And I was just looking at the nuclear clock. I think it's like, I don't follow that, but you follow that at all, Mike?
Not really. I mean, I'll see the headlines when that second hand is moved a little closer to midnight. But the reality is, back when the nuclear scientists were saying there'll be some survivors, they were envisioning a world in which there were only going to be a few of these nuclear weapons, all owned by the United States. Today, the U.S. has thousands of nuclear warheads ready to go. They've got stockpiles. In addition to that, same with Russia. Russia has slightly less nuclear weapons ready to launch, but theirs tend to have higher yields. If we get into this war and all those weapons are used, it'll be just like the movie On the Beach.
No, Mike, you're like a nuclear scientist. You know what you're talking about. But listen, when people hear these rumbles in the ground for the last 30, 40 years, where it's coming from. They got cities underground, Mike. I don't think they're worried about dying. I think they've already got it figured out.
They've got their bunkers. They've been drilling tunnels. Yeah,
yeah, you're exactly.
Yeah, they've got these giant boring machines. They look just like the ones that they dug the Channel Tunnel with. They're a little smaller. And any place you go where you hear this drone, which sounds like a diesel truck idling in the distance, that's one of these tunneling machines somewhere near you.
Well, Mike, I'm going faster because I don't want to get cut off here. But I live in a great area down here in Florida. But 3 or 4 miles from me, there's a nuclear power plant.
Yes.
Do you think those would be just a regular, Florida FP&L plant? Do you think those would be targets just because they're got so many warheads and they got every single nuclear power plant?
Yeah, I'm afraid all power plants, nuclear and otherwise, eventually become targets. Again, look at the history of World War II, where the U.S. was going on into Germany, blowing up power plants, blowing up dams, just wrecking the place. That's the nature of war. Forget about what you see on TV about how glorious and glamorous it is. That's just war propaganda. It's just utter devastation.
You can't get away from the nuclear power plants because they got plenty of warheads. That's the best things to hit, right?
If you're intending to intentionally contaminate, the area, then yeah, it becomes a target. Now, supposedly, all of the U.S. nuclear reactors do have this very heavy protective shell that will withstand an aircraft impact or a small bomb. But obviously, if they get nuked, it's entirely possible that under the neutron flux, the uranium in the reactor core would actually add to the yield of the weapon itself. So you'd get a bigger bang.
Yeah, No, what I'm saying is the Russians got more than enough multi-warhead nuclear weapons. Like you say, they can swerve and dipsy-doodle. They got more than enough to take out every power plant in every city and every small city.
Oh,
they got thousands of.
Yeah, it is insane. Putin was sending a message with his warning about their new weapons. Nuclear war is unthinkable. Please stop thinking about it. But again, Paul Craig Roberts is saying there are actually people inside the Beltway that are actively urging for an unannounced, unprovoked, preemptive nuclear strike on Russia.
Okay, so Mike, I grew up in the 50s like you did when we, duck for cover and everything.
Yes.
So you need to go on your radio show and talk about nothing else but that, because there is nothing more important that you can talk about. Nothing. I totally agree with that. I follow this stuff all the time. I mean, I don't know if Trump, you think Trump thinks he's bluffing and he playing the art of the deal and all this, but maybe it's like you said, like homosexuals. 1/10 of the population, is normal homosexuals because that keeps the population in control. Maybe nuclear war is the next step for our species. And that's what scares me. But hey.
Well, I mean, it certainly would reduce the human population. My concern, and I think it's shared by a lot of other people, is an all-out nuclear war between Russia, China, and the United States could literally exterminate our species. There would be no survival.
No, they got the underground deal.
There are people in the underground bunkers, but they're all politicians. As soon as the stored food runs out and they come on up, there are no taxpayers to give them money. They're going to starve to death as well.
I think they got it figured out. I don't know what they're going to do. But I think they got it figured out. I just hope, obviously, Mike, I'm like you and every other living human being. We don't want this to happen, but it is pretty crazy how close it seems we're coming. And it's like, I can't believe this. But, I don't want to keep you, I got the other callers. I don't want to keep you on the line, but I love your show, Mike. Love Claire, and I'll talk to you later. Thanks.
All right. Thanks an awful lot here. And we're going to start with Jeff in Georgia. I'm probably going to have to take you over the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Michael, how you doing? Amen to that last caller. We have to stop nuclear war. But, Michael, there's a lot of stress on you, it sounds like, because you're at the front lines.
Yes.
And Michael, we're going to win. We are going to win. We have to prevent nuclear war, but a candidate is coming that's going to bring down the banking cartel, and it will bring down the Christian Zionists that have helped lift that up. And you're going to see massive change. You're going to see the power shift back to us. You're going to see a reform, because it's common sense. You're going to see a reform of the welfare system. You're going to see a necessity to work. You're going to see a massive reduction in the military spending, and we're coming home. And that's going to be like $1.5 trillion a year that will be used in this country for the infrastructure for development in our own country. And we'll mind our own business. That's coming. But hang in there.
I certainly hope you're right. It could certainly arrive on the far side of a collapse of the current government. I just hope they're not planning on blowing everything up and starting over from scratch rather than try and fix the infrastructure. Just do a tear down, rebuild. All right, Jeff, got to let you go. Got to do a break for commercials. Back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to take another phone call. Apostle in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Apostle, are you there?
I'm there.
Okay, what's on your mind today?
The flag he was talking about.
Yes.
It's called the Thin Red Line of Courage. What it does, it represents the last ounce of courage firefighters find deep in their blood to conquest their darkest fears in order to save and protect the lives and property for firefighters, their friends, and family.
Yeah, I got some emails over the commercial break here, and apparently there's another variant where the colored stripe is blue for those who support the police. I think it's a nifty symbol. I'm glad that's what it turned out to be.
Again, a lot of people would never know it, if they never actually researched it.
Yes.
What people represent.
Well, that's a good thing to know. Like I said, I've never seen them around here, but maybe the word should get on out. And I know we do a lot of stories about bad police, and there are some bad ones out there. Most of them really are good and trying to do their job properly. Same thing with the firefighters, and we should acknowledge that and give them our support where it is deserved.
Right, because it's hard to find a bad firefighter, you know.
True enough.
Right, you can find a bad police officer, but you're not going to find a bad firefighter.
I imagine not. One of the things I really liked about the Nodé Brothers documentary about 9/11, and yes, there was a lot of information about 9/11, but it starts with a peek inside the world of a novice fireman. And I found that part of the documentary just as interesting as what happens after that first plane impacts the building. So it tells a really good story. And if you haven't seen it, try and hunt it down. It's called simply 9/11. It was shot by these two brothers, the Nodé brothers, who were doing a documentary about firefighter training. They had no idea they were going to witness 9/11. And it really is a very good documentary to see. Anything else, Apostle?
How's Claire doing?
She's doing
worry
better.
about her.
Yeah, she's doing much better. And, she's not fully over it yet. I'm still having to keep her from trying to do anything that exerts her. But now that we're back with this first chiropractor we met when we moved here, she's doing an awful lot better. And that's a tremendous relief for me, not to mention her, of course.
Well, I give her all my blessings and all my love.
I certainly will.
And you as well, Mike.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, buddy.
All right, have a good day. We're going to let you go. Getting into the guns and gun rights, and again, think seriously about this promo offer from RBN. $500 one-time donation, next 90 days gets you a lifetime Commander membership at Front Sight Training. And I'm probably going to put the promotion and the website for Front Sight Training, I'm going to lock them to the top of the What Really Happened page for the next 90 days so that you can always find it. It's a good deal. If I were living anywhere in the American West, I'd go for it myself. We're going to be back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And getting on back to the news here, we're talking about gun control. And as you know, one of the plans that serious people, are looking at regarding school safety is, of course, dealing with the fact that these prescription psychiatric medications do trigger random outbursts of violence. Ben Swan did a segment on that on his reality check. So people are now becoming aware. There is a strong, well-documented link between these medications and these outbursts of seemingly senseless violence. Well, they're senseless because these people are not in their right mind because of the chemicals. Now, another plan they're talking about is to have armed guards in the schools. Hopefully, they'll be a little bit better at the job than Scott Peterson was down in Parkland. But the only way you're going to stop a bad man with a gun is to have a good man with a gun, because the police simply don't show up, or when they show up, they stay outside. Those Florida police, I mean, never mind the deputy sheriffs, the regular police were literally ordered to stay outside while that shooting was going down. Another reason to suspect that it was a false flag hoax. But apparently up in New York City, their anti-gun mayor is now kicking the armed officers out of schools. Parents are outraged. The schools are, of course, gun-free zones, and the kids are now sitting there waiting to be the next bloody shooting gallery for the gun grabbers. Now, there's a story we put up, and it was from survivaldan101.com, and it's talking about a survivor of communist Cuba all the way back when Castro first took over, before the Bay of Pigs, because that changed everything. And basically, the guy's just going on. Everywhere in the world you go, when law-abiding citizens are disarmed, tyranny will follow. And we certainly seem to see all the symptoms here in the United States of America. So we've got to defend that Second Amendment. we've got to hang on to the guns here, because the United States government is now doing to the American people the same thing it's done to these other countries. Talk us into disarming, followed by an attack. This is a very dark and dangerous time. And, you know, every time the gun grabbers come for your guns, and you point out, crime will go up, tyranny will follow, and they'll say, no, 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 this time it'll be different. This time it'll be different. Now, what is the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. I think it's great CNN actually acknowledged the success story in Kennesaw, Georgia, 6 years ago. Their town council passed an ordinance. Every home has to maintain a firearm. And it doesn't even matter if that is still being enforced. The crooks know this is an armed town. Most, if not all, of the homes have a gun. And they go someplace else. They've only had one murder in 6 years. Their violent crime rate is like 2%. Now you compare that with cities like Chicago that have strict gun laws, and look at the difference. As law-abiding citizens are disarmed, crime goes up. Study after study after study has proven that over and over again. When Great Britain put through their gun ban, crime went up, and Britain justified keeping the gun ban by saying, well, the British people felt they were safer. They weren't safer. Was another government lie, but they believed the British government, oh, you're much safer now without your guns. You know, we'll get the bad guys. The cops never show up in time to thwart a crime. Meanwhile, in this country, every single year, 1.5 million crimes are thwarted in progress by law-abiding citizens with legally owned firearms. That's the reality. The police are just out there to write tickets to try and fill up the local government's coffers. They're even admitting it now. So we have to defend that Second Amendment. Now then, getting on back to Cuba under Castro. Following the Bay of Pigs invasion, Castro completely reversed on gun control. Gun ownership was legalized, and Castro started importing, at government expense, cargo ships full of Italian-made Mannlicher Carcano rifles, and made sure every Cuban had one. That's why they planted a Mannlicher Carcano on Lee Harvey Oswald, because the original plan was to blame Cuba for the assassination in order to get the American people to support a second invasion of Cuba. But President Lyndon Johnson was aware of the secret deal Kennedy had made with Khrushchev and knew that a new invasion of Cuba would trigger a nuclear war. And so the story was changed to crazed low-nut assassin who just had horrible taste in firearms. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. So we need to do that. And again, I question the New York City mayor's decision to pull armed officers out of the schools. What is he thinking? Is he serving up those kids as a hot lunch to the next patsy who's out of their mind on drugs, or the next black-clad assassination squad? That story about how Stephen Paddock had the assistance of other parties, we knew that from day one because of that second broken window. And the FBI was ordered not to interview those other suspects. It was a setup. Remember that teacher at Parkland? Saw a guy dressed all in black, no insignia. That's the giveaway right there. And then followed by the video of these 3 police officers running out the back of the building and throwing these rucksacks into the back of a pickup truck. Now, a lot of shooting ranges are starting to offer free training for teachers. And apparently over at Strategic Weapons Academy of Texas, it's owned by Tim Bullock. He's a former Irving police officer, 30 years in law enforcement. And he's saying he's giving free training events on how to protect your students. And I think that's definitely the way to go. I'm not in favor of just handing out guns to teachers and school administrators. I am in favor of them being trained to use them in a combat situation. And continuous, training, refresher courses. I think that's a really good idea. I think if we need to arm ourselves. Do you think if instead of a gun-free zone sign in front of that school, there was a different sign that said, half of our teachers are carrying concealed, the shooters would turn around and leave? We're not trying to actually get a gunfight at the OK Corral on our school campuses. We're trying to give the shooters a reason not to show up at all. By the way, you know why the gunfight at the OK Corral is such an important part of history? Because it was unusual. The image of the wild and woolly West was actually propaganda that was put out by Eastern industrialists to try and discourage their workers from quitting their jobs and going out west to homestead. And so these industrialists hired these authors who wrote these dime novels about, how dangerous it was out there. And there were dangers, rattlesnakes, Gila monsters, things like that. And there was some crime, but not on the level that we see in our modern so-called civilized American society. All right, let's take a phone call. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I was going to say that you went over the amendments that were under threat just about a half an hour ago or something.
Yes.
And, the fewer rights we have, the more important the second one becomes. The more we get it taken away, the more we have to cling to that one, because that's the last bastion, in my opinion.
Well, the Second Amendment is the teeth of the other 9 in the Bill of Rights.
Yeah. What's the other quote? I think I've heard you say it's the difference between being governed and being ruled.
Yes.
Did you say that?
I may have, but at my age, I forget things.
I'm looking at the website right now. I'm listening to you on the RBN, channel, and they're flashing on the RBN stories and about some guy a PTSD guy who just killed 3 women and killed himself or whatever. Yes. Then there was a PTSD guy up in Yountville. I think, Mike, for school safety, think of all the PTSD guys that were after World War I, or after Civil War, or after World War II in Korea, and this stuff didn't happen.
Well,
so
we called them shell shock back in the day, and I don't think it's necessarily the training and the combat experience, but we had a veteran of Iraq call into the show one time and say they're handing out these prescription psychiatric medications like they're M&Ms to the soldiers to help them deal with the emotional stress of going out and invading another country and killing a bunch of people. The Pentagon is spending more on psychiatric medication than they are on Black Hawk helicopters. And these kids come back, their brains have been melted, they're trying to withdraw, and when you're withdrawing from these medications is really when you're most at risk for some kind of a negative reaction. And obviously that's what happened. And I think the reason the gun grabbers didn't jump all over the veterans' home was because it did call attention to the problem of PTSD, which leads to questions, what are you doing to our kids when they're over there in the war zone? And that's a question the Pentagon would rather duck.
Well, another one, Mike, and I think we talked about this before, and I was an infantryman and a Ranger qualified guy for years, and they used to hand out amphetamines like Dexedrines like they were nothing. You go on long patrols, and if you're on a 3-day patrol, you've got 4 days worth of Dexedrine, and you have these guys with the operational tempo that they've got. They're on them all the time, and so there's that. But getting on the school safety side, I'm not against arming teachers and training them. I think that's great, but I do believe that there should be, if you're on any of these psychotropic things or whatever, that you have to take some sort of chemical drug test and maintain it, or you shouldn't be around a school, that's for sure.
Or you shouldn't be allowed to get a gun. And there are several states now where the paperwork to apply for a gun permit does include a checkbox. Are you on antidepressants? And if you check that off, you don't get the permit. And I'm in favor of the Second Amendment, but knowing how dangerous these chemicals are, I have to agree with this policy. People who are on those medications shouldn't be allowed to have firearms. They shouldn't be allowed to operate heavy equipment. They're a disaster waiting to happen. Just walking around casually, and we know that police take a lot of these medications, which may account for why so many innocent people are being just gunned down in cold blood. People, dogs, whatever. Because that too is an out-of-control problem. If you look at the damage these chemicals are doing to our thinking, we may see one day in the future a history book that looks back and says that the United States drugged itself into destruction. Because we know politicians are taking these medications. We look at some of the things coming out of Maxine Waters' mouth or Nancy Pelosi that just don't make any sense. They have a pharmacy right inside the Capitol building. So these people can go on down and get their fix right there without even leaving the building.
Well, also, Mike, again, going back to that World War I thing and World War II, where the combat was so much more intensive, and the PTSD or shell shock or whatever combat fatigue was so much more intense too, I'm sure, and so much greater because the numbers were greater. But you could get machine guns up until 1933, and there were no school shootings.
Yeah.
And you could get, same thing when we were kids. Your story about, varminting the fields and going to school with, 22s and stuff. That didn't happen then.
Everybody had guns. They were tools. We were taught how to use them safely. And like I said, in the entire time I lived in that town in New Hampshire, there was only one gun incident, and that was probably an attempted suicide. I think these mass shootings are an invention of the anti-gun lobby. They're obviously staged events. It's propaganda to try and convince Americans to give up their guns. It's failing miserably. Every time they do another one of these and talk about gun bans, gun sales go through the roof.
I agree with you. It's absolutely, I think they're stage events. That Antifa thing, I absolutely believe that. And I don't know, Mike. They're going to keep doing these though. These people are. Well, by the way, why do you think George Soros isn't in jail?
Because he's got a ton of money, and his lawyers can keep appealing any case against him until after he dies.
I submit if there's any case where the Obama thing, where the president can draw a line through your name and make you disappear, and which is legal now, he's a guy that they should draw a line through his name and make him disappear.
Well, unfortunately, Soros donates very heavily to political campaigns. I mean, the world is ruled by money, and it shouldn't be that way. There should be a balance of interests and requirements. But what we're dealing with is a generation of money junkies who think being a money junkie is just perfectly fine. And that's where we get people who will plunder a county, a city, a nation, and go home happy because they're literally high on the money they've made. They discovered that when they wired up Wall Street traders' brains to brain scan machines, and they discovered that every time they scored a big chunk of money, the part of the brain that lit up is the same exact one that lights up when you do cocaine. It really is a mental illness, but it looks good from the outside. Nice cars, nice clothes, expensive watch, all kinds of girls hanging on your arm, and everybody looks at that and says, I want to be like that. But I think most of these people, they're a prisoner of their own greed. They can't stop. Some of these people have so much money, they're never going to live long enough to spend it all. It's just that acquisition brings a thrill and a rush. And the vast majority of the American people, and I'm one of them, I'd like to be a little more comfortable. I don't need huge mansions. I don't want a supercar. I just want to be comfortable and have some security for the future. And I think that's true of the vast majority of Americans. But all of that is being taken away from us by the greed of the money junkies who are just sucking the nation dry so that they can go to these cocktail parties around Wall Street and say, I've got more than you do.
Yeah, eating their $500 hamburgers.
Yes, I mean, that is absurd. That is absolutely absurd.
Well, I'm going to go have a $2 hamburger, and I got to take off here, Mike.
I generally eat off the dollar menu these days. It helps me keep my weight down. All right, Peter, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. I used to love to eat sushi, but I don't dare do that anymore out here in Hawaii. The University of Minnesota is hosting a professor dedicated to dismantling whiteness to speak next week on how whiteness is an existential threat to the United States. Now, that is a bit of a reach when you consider who created the United States. So this professor, Lisa Anderson Levy, believes teaching is a political act and will discuss ways to decenter whiteness at academic institutions. The attack on white people has started. Now, I'm kind of old-fashioned about education and teaching. When I taught remedial math at the high school level many years ago before I even met Claire in Southern California, and I taught computer animation out at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and that's all I taught. And there was politics on campus, but it was outside on the sidewalks, in the quad, and that's where it should be. But teaching isn't supposed to be political, because if teaching is political, it's not teaching, it's propaganda. And again, these kids have gone heavily into debt to be in that university. How is a lecture on decentering whiteness and white being an existential threat? How's it going to help them find a decent job to pay back those student loans? The reality is it isn't. These college degrees are not only expensive, they're relatively worthless. We're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And liberalism has just jumped the shark here. Somebody did a survey of Democrat college students, and apparently the majority of them said that inclusivity is much more important than freedom of speech. And they're saying they want to protect the feelings of people, even if it means stifling free speech. So now our colleges and universities and the Democrats are attacking the foundations this nation was founded on. They're attacking the First Amendment. You're not allowed to say what you're thinking. You're not allowed to ask questions because you might hurt somebody's feelings. However did Democrats get so thin-skinned? They've really turned into a bunch of sissies. That is just ridiculous. That is just ridiculous. Okay, now earlier in the show when we were talking about the thin blue line, thin red line flags, and I think those are wonderful symbols, by the way. I did mention the vast majority of police are okay. A few bad ones. Firefighters are great. But apparently over in Etowah County, Sheriff Todd Entrikin bought himself and his wife Karen an orange 4-bedroom house with an in-ground pool and canal access for $740,000. Now, some of the residents of Etowah County are wondering how a county sheriff making only a 5-figure annual salary can afford to own multiple houses, including one worth nearly $750,000. And it turns out that the sheriff was pocketing money sent in to feed the prisoners. He was skimming it. And the money being sent in was allocated by federal, state, municipal governments to feed the inmates in the county jail. But apparently he was serving them half rations and keeping the balance of the money. So there are bad cops out there, and that is an ugly reality of life in America. You know what's missing from our upbringing? And maybe it's because of the social media revolution or the fact that both parents are working. Pride in what one does. And again, when I was younger, you'd work at something, and yes, you were working because you needed money to live on, but there was also that instilled desire to do well at your job. to be very good at it, to produce a quality product. In fact, I remember back then, the quality of American-made products was a source of pride for the United States. And today, it's almost like everybody's out there looking for a scam. Maybe this sheriff just realized this economy is not going to hold together well, and everybody's just grabbing the silverware and heading for the doors here. Now, China has reported another outbreak of a highly contagious bird flu. Apparently, this is a strain that surfaced in 2013, and apparently a farm in Shaanxi province has reported another outbreak of what's called the H5N6. Actually, there are 2 of these bird flus out there, and they're both very contagious and very dangerous, so they're going to have to deal with that. Now, still on the subject of China, we have been talking about this Chinese space station, the Tiangyan-1, and how it's coming down somewhere between a week from now and the first week in April. And there was a very bizarre story that came out from Blacklisted News, basically quoting aerospace.org, which is predicting the space station will re-enter on April 3rd and hit Michigan. But then they go on to admit that they have a margin of error of a week on either side. So it's rather pointless to say it's going to come down in Michigan. Of course, if it does hit anything in the United States, it's going to be seized on by the propagandists to rabble-rouse against China. And they really ought not to do that. Now, it is very, very difficult to predict where an uncontrolled space object is going to come on down, because the top of the atmosphere isn't actually flat. It looks that way in the photos, but it isn't. There are high pressure zones and low pressure zones. That's actually what brought Skylab down early, because there had been a plan to send up a booster rocket to boost it into a higher orbit. But there was unusual solar activity. The top of Earth's atmosphere basically grew higher, and Skylab started experiencing a little bit of drag. Because of gravity gradient, it had turned face on, which gave it even more aerodynamic space, and that's what brought it down. So I don't have a high degree of confidence that people in Michigan have anything to worry about any more than any of us under that orbital path, which includes here in Hawaii, have to worry about it. But it is coming down. They can't stop it. Hopefully, it'll just hit the ocean, or it'll hit someplace in a desert where the hydrazine won't be a problem, and people can pick up souvenirs and sell them on eBay. We're going to be taking another commercial break here, and when we come on back, more about space and science news. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about space exploration. And interestingly enough, one of the NASA astronauts who spent a year in space has a twin brother. And when he returned, they basically did a study on the DNA and discovered the astronaut who spent a year in space now has different DNA from his twin. And apparently his telomeres, which are the end caps of the chromosomes that shorten as one ages, actually became longer in space, which means he's probably going to live longer. Because when you run out of telomeres, that's when the chromosomes start to break down and you start to experience the more severe consequences of growing older. So that's kind of interesting. That little bit of news alone is probably going to get the super rich seriously thinking about a space resort. Putting up a space station that looks more along the lines of something from 2001, where there's the Space Hilton and there's McDonald's and the rest of it. But that is very, very interesting. I know there's a lot of doctors who've been working on medical means to lengthen the telomeres, and they have not had a huge amount of success. And what they've been doing is they'll artificially shorten the telomeres and then try and grow them back to the same length. And so far, mixed results on that. Right now, there is a massive solar storm that is hitting the Earth, could knock out electrical supplies, and apparently they've had a major blackout down in Venezuela. People living in the extreme northern and southern latitudes to look outside tonight. There are probably going to be some amazing auroras on display. And of course, it could conceivably damage satellites, although I'm sure the people who make satellites try and build them to survive that. Now, NASA is talking about finally actually doing something about asteroids. We've had a couple of near misses. It's becoming recognized there's a lot more debris floating around out there in the solar system than previously thought. There's currently already a program to try and track all these near-Earth objects, but they can only see them above a certain minimum size. And there have been a couple of real surprises, like that big one that came down over Russia a couple of years ago and shattered all the windows. Nobody even saw that one coming. But NASA is getting ready they've sifted through all the various approaches and solutions on how to deal with asteroids, and they're getting ready to launch a mission called HAMMER, the HAMMER spacecraft, and they're basically starting this project right now where this spaceship will be able to be launched and go on out and just nudge the asteroid off of a collision course with Earth. And that's fine. They're getting a solution to a problem we all knew was there. And again, I'm glad NASA's getting back out into space. Over the last several years, NASA was just turned into a rubber stamp for human-caused global warming. And there was never a replacement for the shuttle. And now a lot of it's gone private. SpaceX is just doing amazing stuff. But I'm glad NASA is really out there doing this. And again, it's primarily for economic reasons. We're never going to catch up to these other countries that we allowed manufacturing to move to for American products based on American technology. We have to leapfrog ahead. We have to find the next big thing. The tech boom of the 70s, 80s, and 90s was forged in the Apollo moon mission. Microchips, new materials, Velcro, all kinds of things came out of that. And so I'm in favor of boosting NASA's budget and just reaping the harvest of the new things they're going to figure out. And this time, we keep these products in the United States of America. We don't license them for manufacture anywhere else in the world. That makes the world come to this country to buy our manufactured goods, and that means manufacturing jobs. At least that's how I would do it, but unfortunately, they're not listening to me. Now, the climate is, in fact, cooling. Again, this last winter set many all-time cold records. New England's under yet another nor'easter, and people are sending me pictures. It's a big one. It's nasty, huge amounts of snow. So the climate is cooling, despite what the global warming people are telling you. And unfortunately, it means growing seasons are shortening. Farmers are having to wait till later in the spring to plant. They have to wait later in the season for the first harvest to come on in. And there's not enough time for what's called a bumper crop, which is when you try and get an extra crop in there before autumn hits. So on top of the toxification of the fish from Fukushima, from the Gulf oil disaster, we may see food supplies start to dry up, and that means prices are going to go up. And we're already seeing that here in Hawaii. We went to the Sam's Club the other day. Talk about sticker shot. When we were checking out, Claire looked at the final price and said, "I don't see that jar of caviar in the shopping cart." And the checkout person laughed at that. Now, here's an interesting little story. Apparently, there are 11 mayors across the United States who have basically said our cities will not do business with companies that do not support net neutrality. We know that Washington State passed a law saying net neutrality or go do business someplace else. So town by town, city by city, local leaders are taking back everyone's right to connect and communicate. Because everybody understands we're dependent on the internet now. It's not just, the nerd's hobby. It's not a cool tech thing out there. Our lives are inextricably linked with the internet, and fair access is necessary. And a lot of people are seriously questioning the FCC for not applying common carrier legislation to the internet. They basically misclassified it. And again, it's another example of a government agency that is supposed to be looking out for the welfare of the American people, instead being in bed with corporate interests. who would like the internet to just be their personal little content delivery platform, and all those little pesky bloggers can go jump in the lake. Now, apparently, there are allegations that Apple's iCloud company in China has been stealing personal information. And I've never liked this push onto the cloud. They're trying to take us back to the computer model of the 1970s, where you would have a terminal in your home, but it accessed a remote mainframe where all the software and the data was being stored. When I worked at Robert Abel and Associates, I had an old VT52 with an acoustically coupled modem that I would log into the computers at Robert Abel to check on the process of my renders. And that was the time when I began learning about Usenet and FTP and all the other wonderful things the early internet actually had. We used to have a little game where we'd take our keys and jangle them over that acoustically coupled modem and just see what garbage popped up on the screen of the VT52. I actually got an email from somebody who's been to that Front Sight Firearms Training Institute, and he came on in and he's got a little bit of advice. He's saying that you should consider electronic earmuffs. Now, there are ear covers and ear protectors, but the electronic ones have the advantage that you can hear what's around you in terms of voices, then they shut off when they detect a gunshot coming on in. And a few years ago, apparently, some gun ranges started making them mandatory as opposed to simple earplugs. And he goes on to say that Front Sight offers equipment rentals, pistols, rifles, shotguns, ammo. When you arrange for your training course, you tell them what you want, and they'll have it there on hand. And that way, you don't have to try, taking a gun and ammo through TSA if you're having to fly to Nevada to attend your course. Now, Nevada is an open carry state. Do not carry concealed unless you're licensed to do so, and your license is accepted in Nevada. So apparently, a lot of people have been there, and yeah, this is a good deal. If I were living in the Western U.S., I would go for this deal myself. Absolutely. All right, let's see what else is going on here. Now, this is an interesting story. In Austin, Texas, they had what was called a body hacking convention. And the CEO of biotech company Ascendance Biomedical basically went on stage. Guy's name is Aaron Trawick. And he injected himself with an experimental herpes vaccine because he actually does have herpes. And he basically injected himself. And all of a sudden, his behavior started getting erratic, starting the next day. And according to his co-workers, he was just erratic. He made some bad decisions. And he almost destroyed his own business. These things are dangerous, and they are not testing adequately. Okay, let's see what's going on here. Somebody just posted a story. Hillary didn't slip and fall in India. She was dancing on that staircase, you know. Yeah, okay. Even Fox News was covering the story that Hillary basically insulted the Trump voters all over again, saying that those Midwest voters were worthless and Hillary won where it counted along the coasts. I'll bet she's on antidepressants. Okay, story out of Blacklisted News. The world is running out of phosphorus, which threatens the global food supply. And apparently there is a shortage because the U.S. and Israel have been dropping it flaming all over the enemy. But they're very concerned. We're in a situation here right now where modern farming techniques don't supply all of the minerals that plants really need and normally would get from composted topsoil. And as a result, the plants they're growing, the produce that results, it may look like it's good, healthy food, but it may be seriously deficient in important nutrients. And it's another way in which corporatized science, corporatized farming, is really damaging our planet. Okay, phone lines are still open, 800-313-9443. And let's take a look at this. This is an update on this lawsuit against Alex Jones. And apparently, InfoWars creator Alex Jones and other right-wing media personalities have been sued by a former State Department official who says they made him a target of harassment after he posted a video showing the car attack during a white nationalist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. So it's not an issue of questioning the official story. And again, this is lawfare. He's not going to win the lawsuit. But the goal is to just start suing the independent media and bankrupt them with legal fees. And unfortunately, when somebody hits you with a trivial lawsuit, unless the judge declares it's trivial and throws it out of court, it can bankrupt you, even if you win the case. Now, apparently, Georgetown and the CIA are suing InfoWars and openly call for conservative news to be banned. The Silicon Curtain is coming down. This is really very serious stuff indeed. All right, let's see what else is coming on in. We already talked about Russia demands samples of the Soviet chemical weapons. It's just amazing. Arnold Schwarzenegger wants to sue Big Oil for knowingly killing people. Good luck on that one. Big Oil has lots of money, and they'll keep the case tied up in court for years. People are still complaining in Baltimore about how the school district can't afford to heat the schools. The city of Baltimore can't afford to heat the schools. The kids are literally in the classrooms in parkas and mittens, but they're going to blow $100,000 to bus students to a gun control rally. It's things like this that give me a feeling that the deep state liberal machine has reached the panic stage. And they're just trying to ram through their agenda before more Americans wake up. So, let's see what we have here. Forbes is reporting that Israel forcibly injected their African immigrants with birth control. And we know that Israel has wanted to sort of reverse the right of return law for certain types of Jews. And now they want to deport the Ethiopian Jews back to Ethiopia. You know, the reality is there's no such thing as a Jewish people. Judaism is a religion. And like all other religions, it has adherents in many different lands, many different ethnic groups. And of course, Israel likes to pretend there is a Jewish people, but it's really not accurate. It is a religion. And that's why so many people are offended by Israel calling itself the Jewish state. That's like saying there's a Catholic state or a Methodist state or an Islamic state. You can hear them screaming and yelling about, oh, the Islamic State, it's a theocracy. So is Israel. Now, a while back, Israel was being accused of trying to develop ethnically sensitive biological weapons. Weapons that would be lethal only against certain genetic types. And I don't know if they succeeded, or they may have decided that there are simply too many Jewish people of too many different ethnic groups to move forward with that kind of an operation. Now, Israel likes to believe that all the world's Jews are descended from the Hebrews. That's absolutely not true. My family was Jewish up until the 1490s in Queen Isabella's Purge. We were Sephardic Jews, Spanish Jews, which is a mixture of half Hebrew, half Berber. That's what the DNA thing says. The Ashkenazi are the descendants of converted Khazars from Central Asia. So the irony in all of this is I actually have more Hebrew blood than Bibi Netanyahu himself does. Claire's laughing in the other room here. It really is silly when people just get ideas into their head that are not based on fact, and then they operate on them. Okay, we got a caller on the line. Neil in California, we're going to start with you. I'm going to have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael, Claire in the United States of America. I wanted to talk about our biggest immigrants problem, and you go and start talking about the Khazars.
Okay, well, I'm going to have to cut you off for 3 minutes. Cut you off for 3 minutes. Don't go away. I'm going to come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Neil in California. And Neil, you were starting to tell us about what you see as the biggest immigration problem.
The biggest immigration problem for the United States would happen to be, let's let every immigrant from every part of the planet come in here. So
I agree.
We can't
it's
categorize
insane.
or be racist, because immigrant is not a race. Illegal is not a race. My grandmother, Irish, came off a boat from Ireland. Great-great-grandmother. So that was many generations ago. Went through Ellis Island, filled out the paperwork, swore an oath, and became an American.
Yes.
The people that I'm hearing come in here, they're coming in here on planes loaded to the hilt, put onto buses, and driven across America to be placed in, I don't know, sanctuary cities, stuff like that. So now that's what I wanted to talk about. You brought up the Khazars, and I know some Viking history. The family's well anointed with the Vikings, and the Khazars were the Vikings' two biggest war enemies. Their two biggest wars was to go over the mountains and literally kill them, kill every man, woman, and child, and it sounds ruthless, but they were that evil and that bad. They failed the first time. They went back the second time. The second time, there were remnants that were left, and they kind of got out and escaped. They tried. I love
where
the
the word,
Viking heritage.
You know where the word Russia comes from, right?
Rus.
Rus. The names of one of the Viking tribes. Yeah, that's how far they reached.
So,
anyway, listen, Neil, I'm going to let you go. We got one more call. I'm going to try and sneak in before the end of the program here. Frank in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Here's the way I see it. It's real plain and simple. I live in the real world. Judaism is organized crime masquerading as a religion. That's all I got to say.
Well, I think that definition could be applied to a lot of different religions. I mean, look at what the Catholics are going through, with their pedophilia scandal. And I've been to the Vatican. I've been to the Vatican. They spent a lot of...
Jews control the Vatican. Jewish money controls the Vatican.
Well, they got a lot of it because I've been to the Vatican, and I've seen what an expensive place that is. Anyway, listen, Frank, I'm going to let you go here. No more calls. I got a couple of headlines I want to share with you. First of all, apparently in his speech today, Donald Trump, when he was out there in Miramar, Trump is saying a space force is needed to defend space. Now, setting aside how technologically challenging and hideously expensive that's going to be, there are treaties that forbid the militarization of space other than for surveillance satellites. And a lot of people were very concerned about Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative was going to violate that treaty, but they never got that far. Now, we don't know what that robotic mini shuttle's been doing up there, but if Trump wants to project the next world war into space, that's going to be very expensive, and a lot of stuff is going to be crashing out of the sky on us all. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got a lot of wonderful things to share with you. Please make a point of talking with all your friends and family about what you heard on the show, what you read at whatreallyhappened.com. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.